I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am very pleased to be joined by Erik Billinger. He is Chief Development Officer at ACE Scholarships. He's been a part of the team for about 5 years, and he is relatively local, having earned his undergraduate degree and master's in organizational leadership from the University of Denver. So, welcome to Tipping Point, New Mexico, Erik.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, well, we're always eager to talk about education and opportunities to improve education here in New Mexico. Uh, don't know how much you're familiar with New Mexico's policy, climate, or outcomes, but in the latest NAEP back in 2022, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, New Mexico came in dead last in all major categories: fourth grade reading, fourth grade math, eighth grade reading, and eighth grade math. So, setting the table in that way, what is ACE Scholarships?
Appreciate that, Paul. ACE Scholarships started almost 25 years ago. We have our 25th anniversary next March, and we provide scholarships to low-income families to attend private K through 12 schools. So we also advocate for school choice, and with that exciting 25th anniversary, we just reached a huge milestone. We just gave away our 100,000th scholarship. So we've given away 100,000 scholarships in our 24-year history. So that's what we do. We provide opportunities and educational freedom to families of low income.
Well, congratulations on that, being in business for so long and that milestone. Uh, you know, what's you work in New Mexico, but you're not everywhere. Why New
Yeah.
Mexico, aside from what I just said?
Yeah. So we are in 12 states. So we started in Colorado by five prominent business leaders in Denver here. And we got an awesome phone call in 2022, just 3 short years ago, from the Daniels Fund. And they said, we would like to expand ACE down to New Mexico. So it's always been a great partnership with the Daniels Fund, based here in Denver as well. And Daniels Fund really focuses on Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, and Wyoming. Bill Daniels was the founder. But when we got this opportunity to expand down in New Mexico, we took it right away. And we started, that's why we're in New Mexico. A little more detail there, Paul. Just 3 years ago, we were right around 100 kids. And now we are almost at 500 kids in New Mexico.
Wow, that's fantastic. There's definitely a lot of need here for uh, educational options. So,
Mhm.
I guess if you're a parent listening to this show, or maybe you have grandkids or your neighbor down the street, uh, how do families apply for these scholarships? And what does low income mean? Is it the school lunch program, or are there some other determining factors?
Yeah, we use the federal poverty level. Let me answer that question first. And we do 350% above federal poverty level. So for a family of four, that's right around 100,000 household income would qualify. And that's our only qualifying qualification is strictly household income. So that's first of all how you qualify. And then currently, right now in New Mexico, we have 39 partner schools, private schools, K through 12. Some of them are just K through 8, and some of them are high school. Um, but a parent, if they really have interest in going and attending that school for their kid, I'm sure they can go right to the school administrator and say, do you guys partner with ACE? And hopefully the answer is yes. And you can apply for our scholarship. And we definitely encourage all families that are interested to apply.
Got it. And I noticed my kids go to a school that is served by ACE scholarships, so that's
That's
good to
great.
know. Uh,
Yeah.
what you're not giving 100% of tuition to the families. You're giving partial scholarships, and
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that, and maybe the strategy behind it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that, Paul. The power, the secret sauce, so to speak, of our program is everybody has skin in the game. So it's a three-way approach. So the average cost of private schools is just under $10,000. So a lot of people, when they think private schools, they're thinking very expensive 25K plus schools, and that's not the case at all. Most private schools are less than $10,000. So take that cost, and parents chip in, the school chips in, and then ACE chips in. So it just our donors love that, right? Because everybody does have skin in the game, and these families maybe they can afford $100 a month or $200 a month. As long as they have skin in the game, this model works, and the families are very invested. We're invested. The school's invested, and again, that's the power of our model right there.
Yeah, and I want to dig in on that a little bit because that's something obviously lacking in our traditional public education system. Something that I think really, even the advocates for education savings accounts,
Mm.
kind of lose sight of. Of course, for our listeners, everybody who listens to this show on a regular basis knows what an ESA is, but I'll briefly describe that it's essentially a scholarship through uh, your tax dollars instead of the money for a school of choice being uh, you know, paid for by uh, the, the the taxpayers directly. You're getting a scholarship that you get to choose the school that you wish to send your kids to. But there's not a lot of skin in the game, at least not readily apparent in an ESA model. But your model is different from uh, that kind of more government-driven model of funding.
Yeah, that's a good point. And ESAs, right? I mean, there's what, 17 states now that have some sort of ESA program in the US. And they're all different, right? Some have different levels of how much they'll support. Um, but yeah, ESAs are definitely hot right now.
Yeah, and it's a great model. I mean, we would certainly love to have those down here. Are you operating in states? I mean, I know New Mexico, we have charter schools, and that's pretty much it. How do those programs affect your efforts? Are they pretty much just two ships in the night? You don't really interact with them at all. If an ESA comes along, does that mean you bow out of the state? How does that work?
I'm glad you asked that too, Paul. So, of the 12 states that we currently give private scholarships in, Utah just passed a huge ESA program. And we actually, as a board and as an organization, decided to jump in and help. So, we administer the Utah ESA program, which is currently $82 million and 10,000 kids. So, no, we're huge fans of ESAs. We have experience administering and giving out scholarships through our programs team. So we've now taken ESAs as an opportunity to help even more families out. So we'll always give private scholarships away, but we also are going to use our team and our experience giving those ESA scholarships out as well. So
Interesting.
glad you asked that.
Yeah. Now, New Mexico has seen proposals
Mhm.
for tax credit scholarships, which are not as robust as an ESA program. You're
Mhm.
essentially relying on donors to donate to a scholarship organization. Uh, you're not, at least in New Mexico, operating under such a model because we don't have a state level tax credit. Your tax credit, to the extent that people donating to the ACE program, they're doing that through the federal tax code. I assume that
Yep.
those state level tax credits have got to be a boon to your efforts in
Yeah.
particular.
Absolutely. Of the 12 states we're in, four of them we do have tax credit programs. So Montana is 100%, Louisiana 95%, Kansas 75%, and Arkansas 100%. So you're right, Paul. Those tax credit programs are very, very beneficial, both to donors and to families.
Yeah, and by you're talking about those percentages. Those are the percentages under which how much of a credit they get and how much money is passed along to the scholarship organization, right?
Exactly. So on your state tax liability, that's how much credit you get, not just a tax write-off, but a tax credit.
Got it. Okay. Sounds this is a great sounding program. Something for donors as well as people looking for a better option for their children. So, t- talk about your website and where you find this information at, and uh, how people can get involved one way or the other.
Yeah. So for everybody listening, if you could go to ACE Scholarships, and scholarships is plural, acescholarships.org. You can learn everything about ACE and what states we're in and the tax credit programs. Um, that is a wonderful website that you can visit.
Yeah, there's a lot of information there, and it's great that you're working here in New Mexico. Kudos to
Mhm.
the Daniels Fund for encouraging you to get involved. There's few states with more of an educational challenge than right here in New Mexico. So I've got to ask, what kinds of metrics do you track your students with in terms of, you know, I've got to assume that your graduation rate is somewhere close to 100%. And I'm sure student outcomes uh, rise dramatically with your program, but how robust is your kind of data tracking?
Yeah, that's very important to us. Very, very important. And you're right. Our graduation rate across the board, across 12 states we're in, is nearly 100%. So you nailed that one, Paul. And then you mentioned earlier on the podcast the NAEP scores, right? And to be more specific, unfortunately, New Mexico is 21% proficient in reading for fourth graders and 36% proficient in math for fourth graders, right? And our proficiency rates are in the mid 70s. So instead of 21% fourth graders being proficient in reading, we're near 70%, right? And instead of 36% proficient in math, we're again in the low 70s. So those are some proficiency scores. And I think it's important for everybody to understand that we're taking kids that are behind, right? We're taking kids that are usually a year and a half to 2 years behind in school. So we're not cherry picking, so to speak. We're taking kids and catching them up, right? And putting them in an environment that best fits their needs and gets their proficiency rates up. And then when we quote graduation rate, not only graduation, but we're 95% going to college or the military or to a trade school. And mostly first generation too. So some exciting data there for sure.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Our kids say you apply for the program and get in as a first grader? Just throwing it out there. Are you eligible for these scholarships every year as long as your family is underneath the income thresholds, like
Yeah.
through high school?
Yeah, great question again, Paul. So with us, we partner with over 1,000 schools, and we have over 14,000 scholarships given out this year, this school year. So with that many, we just have them apply for the first year and check their income qualifications that first year, and then after that, we don't keep checking it. We keep them on scholarship until they need us. The average kid is on scholarship for 3.8 years to be exact, so almost 4 years. But a lot of times the family situation improves so much in those 4 years and they simply don't need us anymore. But important for your listeners to know the average kid stays on scholarship for almost 4 years.
Got it. So I was going to ask, that was my next question is, if a family, the parents get a raise, start making more money, do you take the scholarship away from them or not? But I guess that answers my question.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's good because yeah, it would be tough to you get into that trap a lot with federal um, welfare programs and financial assistance of various kinds where you
Yeah.
actually suffer if you move up the wage scale, and that's it's a tough problem. It's something to overcome. I certainly don't want my uh, government, my tax dollars going to fund people who can easily afford to pay for things themselves. But on the other hand, especially with something like a scholarship, that's an expensive proposition for lower and lower middle income families.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So, because we love to talk policy here at the Rio Grande Foundation, and that's our primary effort is to reform, policies. It's obvious that you guys would support some forms of school choice and bringing those choices to students across the country. So talk a little bit about that advocacy.
Yeah, so we are a 501(c)(3), right? So with that, we're not a 501(c)(4). If we were, we could spend more on policy, but we're limited as a 501(c)(3). So we spend maybe 5% of our dollars on policy and advocacy, and our goal is to protect and to pass policy that is school choice friendly, right? Especially in the states that we exist. You mentioned earlier those tax credit programs. It's important that we protect those, right? And if we can continue to pass school choice friendly programs, we're definitely gonna advocate for that.
So there's obviously different models. We mentioned the tax credits
Hmm.
and then the ESAs. Just talk
Hmm.
about you know, eh, obviously New Mexico. We've talked about that fairly extensively, but in the states you are involved in, how do you see the climate shaking out in terms of some of these choice opportunities? And um, there's a lot of action going on across the country with some of these choice programs. It seems like most of the actions on ESAs are tax credit scholarships still viable as a policy option, or is it kind of all the action moving to the ESA side of things?
Yeah, I would say a little bit of both, right? And you're right. It is passing. It's friendly right now. As I mentioned, 17 states currently have ESAs. Talked to our policy guy the other day. He thinks in the next 5 years we get to 30 states, perhaps, um, which would be incredible, right? And yeah, I see some tax credit states improving their tax credit. For example, if they're at 75%, maybe if that's working and the data is showing that it's working, they'll up that percentage and make it more universal, perhaps. Um, and then ESAs right now, to be honest, it would be nice to talk about school choice. Our data shows that it is bipartisan, right? But there are states that, that more democratic states that are not as friendly for ESAs currently, but I see that changing in the future.
Well, I would put New Mexico in that category of states, despite our poor performance, that are not really fertile at this point for the kinds of choice that we're talking about. So,
Yeah.
what kind of involvement do you have you had at this point in New Mexico up in the legislature? It's a wild world up there in the roundhouse
Yeah.
in Santa Fe. I'm assuming as you're doing development, that's not something you're involved with, but have you had representatives of your organization involved in the legislature in Santa Fe, or are you kind of waiting to see how the policy, climate evolves, say after this election or something?
Yeah, definitely waiting right now. Um, we haven't gained any ground here the last couple of years on that, so that's why we're focused on private scholarships. Um, but on that note, if I can say, Paul, we do have some interesting data that 75% of parents nationwide support school choice, right? And 77% of Democrats support school choice. 86% of Republicans support school choice, and 67% of independents support school choice. And that's all from EdChoice's recent polling and Real Clear Opinion Research poll. So um, those are some amazing numbers, right? That school choice really is bipartisan, or it should be.
Yeah, and that's an interesting conversation to have. But I'll ask it this way: with those numbers in mind, why do you think, and especially in New Mexico, because that's what I'm most familiar with among all the states, why haven't we seen more action in favor of school choice? We're at the bottom. We have nowhere to go but up theoretically, and yet we get resistance consistently in Santa Fe for these kinds of efforts.
Yeah, I wish I could answer that fully. I don't know why we're not. I mean, the data is pretty clear, right? The proficiency rates are clear. Um, the best thing we can do, Paul, is keep providing these private scholarships and showing the legislations that we are successful, right? And that it works, right? And we can share testimonies and stories and show how it works. Um, but yeah, we're just going to have to continue to share those stories and share those numbers and hope that they'll be open to some form of school choice going forward.
So let's compare and contrast a little bit. Since you're up in Denver and most familiar probably with the history and current situation in Colorado, a state that when folks get up on the day after the election, hopefully, or a couple of days after the election, worst case scenario, uh, most of your electoral maps will have New Mexico and Colorado as blue states. We're Democrat controlled. Colorado, of course, is as well. But
Mhm.
you do have a little bit more choice options up in Colorado. Can you talk about what options are available and contrast that a little bit with New Mexico to the
Yeah,
extent that that's relevant?
yeah, we might have to find another state to compare, Paul, because Colorado is very similar, right? So, of those three levels we keep talking about, we have private donor-funded scholarships, you have tax credit programs, the next level, and then you have ESA, is what I call the Cadillac of school choice. In Colorado, we're privately funded scholarships, right? We have 25 years of that, and we're currently at 4,700 kids this school year. So it's a larger program up here, but we don't have any tax credit programs here in Colorado, and we don't have an ESA option here in Colorado. So maybe we can compare it, if it's okay, Paul, to maybe like a Montana or a Kansas or any other state.
Well,
Yeah.
sure, but before we do that, let's briefly. I mean, Colorado has I just socioeconomically is a lot
Mm,
more advantaged than New Mexico, even if it doesn't have kind of the choice options that we both agree would really help our education system in both states. But uh,
yeah.
Colorado's performance is relatively strong on a lot of these standardized tests like the NAEP. I don't have them off the top of my head because it's not the state I work in, but uh,
Yeah.
Colorado does have a pretty strong overall education outcome relative to a lot of states, not just New Mexico.
Yeah, I think Paul, another thing to consider is just the school network, right? What options parents have. For example, in Colorado, we have 189 private schools that we partner with, whereas compared to New Mexico, we have 39 private schools we partner with, right? So there's just a lot more school options here, especially in the Denver area. Um, and so that might be part of it, if that's kind of where you're getting at, Paul.
Well, yeah, that and you think that is a result of? I mean, obviously, Colorado has a bigger population than does New Mexico, but
Mhm.
you also have a lot more private businesses up there than we have, and people don't really think about these kinds of things. But having more of those private businesses generates wealth and prosperity and
Hmm.
generates things like educational options and choice that redound to the benefit of those kids, even if it's not, necessarily a scholarship program or something. I mean, Albuquerque. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, so
You
we
did?
we joke that you can't throw a rock in Cincinnati and not hit a Catholic school somewhere. There's just a lot of them, and it's a bigger
Okay.
city. It's an older eastern city, but in Albuquerque, we just have one major Catholic high school. So that's a big difference. Even though the population of Albuquerque is pretty substantial. So, uh, I think it is important that to throw economic diversification and overall prosperity as both a cause and an effect of educational choice and educational improvement, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right there, Paul. We talk a lot about, we have a kind of a slogan right now, and we're changing education changes everything, right? And you're referencing the poverty rate down in New Mexico and the crime rate we could talk about as well. But what is the root cause of all that, right? And our belief is if you change education, you change everything. So um, that is definitely why we're glad we're down in New Mexico.
All right, so let's talk about a state or two that you're working in that's really bringing choice and opportunity to the education system. So you mentioned Montana, but feel free to throw any others that you think are really
Yeah.
getting the
So
job
first,
done.
maybe I start with this one because this is the most impressive one. We're not in Florida. There's a similar organization in Florida, like an ACE in Florida. So we don't need to go down there, but they're in 2019, Florida was ranked 33rd, and they're now ranked number one in low income performance in education, right? And they're absolutely the most school choice friendly state, right? So there's some good evidence right there for you, Paul, that school choice works. I mean, to go from 33 in the nation to number one in the last 4 or 5 years is unbelievably impressive. Indiana, we're not in Indiana either, but they moved from 22nd to number three in the nation after implementing school choice policies. So, um, pretty impressive right there.
And Arizona, more locally speaking, is another national leader when it comes to educational options and really
Mhm.
moving the needle in a positive direction. And that's one that I would say that socioeconomically, Arizona is more similar to New Mexico than any other state in the country,
Mm.
including Colorado. So
Yeah, yeah. They were the pioneering for the ESA for sure.
yeah. So is the goal to just grow the program and continue to try to help more
Yeah.
kids over time and expand the number of states you work in? Are you uh, is the policy kind of advocacy effort something that you're looking to get more involved in? Because we've had this upsurge, and maybe you can talk about it since COVID-19 and I think a combination of the lockdowns and parents seeing via the Zoom classroom just what was going on in those schools and how kind of it deviated from their values. But I've
Hmm.
got to imagine that as the so-called lower hanging fruit is plucked, the easier states to get kind of choice programs and uh, become choice states that the advocacy has to take on a bigger role to try to get more of those of states on board.
Yeah, exactly. So to zero in on New Mexico again, Paul, I think it's important to emphasize again. Just 3 years ago, we were at less than 100 kids on scholarship in New Mexico. And 3 years later, we now have 474 kids on scholarship. So that is equivalent to $1.25 million we're investing in kids this school year, in 39 different schools, and the average scholarship is just over $2,800. So we're just really excited about that growth, right? In just 3 years, we've been so fortunate to have some folks in New Mexico step up and really want to help out kids in New Mexico, and to see that percentage of growth to go from around 100 kids to 474 kids, we're just so excited about that. I mean, I myself, I'm based in Denver, and I try to come down to New Mexico once a quarter and do a little road show down there and meet with potential donors and visit the schools. And there's so much need down there, and so my personal goal is to keep growing that substantially. But we are excited about what's happened there the last couple of years.
That's great. And so you've yeah, I'm going to let you toot your horn, or I'll toot your horn for you because you're the development guy. So by increasing the number of donors to your program and increasing the amount of donations to by the existing donors, you've been able to really grow the program in New Mexico. And I assume that
Yeah,
that's a top priority that you have, that you're just
yeah,
trying to get more and more people to support this. Do you see uh,
yeah.
a shift? Is there, it was COVID, or maybe those COVID policies, and our governor was among the most lockdown oriented governors in the entire country, and obviously that had a devastating impact on our kids here in New Mexico. Do you see that as something that people are reacting to? Donors are willing to step up where they were maybe were more reticent, or is it just kind of an ongoing growth situation?
No, you are so right, Paul. COVID, um, to spin it as a positive, is the best thing that's ever happened for school choice, right?
Right.
It woke up parents, it woke up donors. We have seen a 600% growth and since COVID hit as an organization in scholarships, right? So 600% since COVID. So you're spot on, right? COVID is just woke everybody up, so to speak. The curtains got pulled back, and people were able to see what was going on, and so yeah, and we see donors wanting to invest more in K through 12. Um, maybe if they had other giving priorities, maybe at the higher education level. I'm hearing a lot of donors say we want to invest in K through 12. K through 12 is where it's at right now. So, um, so I think all those ingredients, you kind of combine them, and that's why people are willing to invest more, and they see a return on their investment, right? When they give, every $3,000 is helping a kid out for a whole school year and giving them a chance at a great school and a great education, and changes their future. So when donors see a $3,000 investment that can change the life of a kid, they love that ROI, right? Because most of our donors are business people, and they just see that it works. So, but you're spot on. COVID was um, truly the best thing that's happened for school choice across the country.
Now, do you see that momentum continuing? I mean, most of the school lockdowns ended, even in states like New Mexico, by 2022. So here we are, essentially a couple years after that situation. Do you see things continuing, or is it just getting more and more challenging based on the states that are, left over, that haven't gone towards more of a choice option? It obviously, COVID's not going to by itself result in a different political class being elected, and that's something that's fundamental to getting some of these options taken care of. But you can do it obviously with raising money and doing it kind of outside a state level system as well, as you've done.
Yeah. Yeah, I do see it continuing, but it is critical that these ESA programs get implemented flawlessly, right? Because if we can implement those ESA programs and call what we call white glove service, and handle them the right way and show that they're successful, then I think other states are going to look at that and say, okay, we should try this as well. So that's why our team, when we took on the Utah program, we're really making that a high priority to make sure we do a great job with that, because we just need to show that it works, and and frankly not make any mistakes, right? And show that it can be successful. So I think the future, to your momentum question, right? ESAs is really how you scale it.
Excellent. Yeah, the ESAs and making sure that that money is actually going to kids in need and helping the people it's meant for and not being wasted. Obviously, it's a higher standard than the government education system, the government schools, but it's also a fair standard that you really need to be pretty much perfect in your approach. So I
Right.
appreciate the work you and the folks at ACE do, and I appreciate your being here in New Mexico, which is definitely a challenging political climate as it stands right now. But those things can change, and hopefully we'll be able to work side by side with your policy team to move New Mexico towards better choice options. So, want to give you this chance to say anything that we missed or addressed issues that may not have come up in this conversation so far as we conclude here.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot there, Paul. I look forward next time I'm down in New Mexico to meet you in person and meet your team and any friends and just know that we're working hard and New Mexico is a priority. We see the need down there, and even though 474 kids on private scholarships is something we should be really proud of, we need to increase that. There are thousands more kids that we could help out, and there's so many cool stories. A story I just heard the other day is a kid named Bentley down in Albuquerque, and his family. This kid Bentley, who's in fourth grade, was really struggling in school and couldn't find a school that fit his needs, and he's actually autistic. And his family called us, and we got him a scholarship to a private school there in Albuquerque, and they are so thankful. Right? They send us pictures all the time of Bentley and how he's making friends now in this new school, and his teachers are really helping him out. And those are the stories we hear all the time, Paul. And we love sharing those stories with donors, and it shows just how real it is. And appreciate you giving me the time, Paul, to share the ACE story and what our goals are going forward. And it's always good to talk about my favorite subject, school choice.
Good deal. Well, again, it's acescholarships.org for more information. You can donate. You can find out more about applying for a scholarship through the organization, and of course, the policy side of things as well, which we also work on at the Rio Grande Foundation. And look forward to hopefully working more closely with you all. So thanks for your time today, Erik, and thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointsnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.